On this week's episode of Hockey Inside Out, we recap the Montreal Canadiens win over the Pittsburgh Penguins, being down 2-0, and then coming back to win as they did. We recap that matchup. And as for the Habs, they had some close games early in the week, then got crushed by the Avalanche. But yet the Habs fans are saying, go Habs, go. What are our takeaways from that? And finally, going into the final 15 games of the regular season, which prospect could be called up to the big club to see some action with the Montreal Canadiens, plus the bonus questions on this week's episode of Hockey Inside Out. Welcome into another edition of Hockey Inside Out. I'm your host, Moe Khan, alongside Stu Cowan and Andrew Berkshire, and the well-tanned Rick Green. Rick, you look like you're darker than all of us combined, my friend.
I'm trying to do my best to, get through this time of year, and it's a dirty job, but somebody has to do it.
Well, hopefully South Florida's treating you better than what we're getting from Montreal weather the last few weeks. Gents, on Tuesday night, the Habs, they were down 2-0 to the Pittsburgh Penguins. They come back to win 6-4 in a thriller, almost March Madness-like with the basketball tournament beginning this week. The Habs finally, for the first time in nearly 20 years, sweep the season series of Pittsburgh, winning all 3 games this regular season. What were your takeaways from the Habs win over Pittsburgh on Tuesday night?
I think putting it in context, compared to the previous game, second half of a back-to-back, first one against the Colorado Avalanche, where they dropped to 4-0 right away. It seemed like the game had barely started and the Canadiens were down 4-0. So when the Penguins went up 2-0 in the same manner in that second half of the back-to-back, I think pretty much everyone expected the Canadiens to fold in that moment, and they didn't. They just kept pushing. And, I don't think anybody is under the auspices or the delusion that the Canadiens played a perfect game against the Pittsburgh Penguins. They were thoroughly dominated offensively, but they found ways through the Penguins defensively, and Tristan Jarry was terrible. So the Canadiens took advantage of that and eked out their first win in, I guess, 7 straight losses going into that, so 8 games. And I think, honestly, this is just Martin St. Louis' team in a nutshell. They just don't give up. They don't know when they're beat. And that's going to carry through, I think, to when they're in a competitive mode. And it's going to be important. These kinds of games lay the groundwork for those young players that are in the lineup to say, like, listen, this is how you have to play, whether you're bad or you're good. When they're actually in a good mode and they have, like, the horses to do it, having that attitude is going to put them back into games where they're maybe not fresh, right? Or they don't have their legs at the beginning of the first period. They're going to find ways back into games. This is a good lesson to learn for all those young kids.
And I think, if you're trying to get a good read on Sam Montembeault and whether or not he can consistently play and do the job, 38 saves last night. The guy was phenomenal when it came to, making timely saves that allowed the Canadiens to kind of find their way to get the win. But, I've touched on it before. The big concern that I have is just their sloppy defensive zone play, where they seem to be running all over the place with no type of discipline in positioning, and resulting in primetime scoring chances that continue to happen, not only against Pittsburgh, but a number of times over the course of the season. And I'm not sure exactly what the system is that they're using defensively, but I really think there's a problem area there when it comes down to everybody knowing what they're supposed to do and where they're supposed to go. Because I don't know how many times I've seen a defenseman, which was highly unusual back in the day, where you got a defenseman way out at the blue line. Times have changed a little bit, but then your expectations of having somebody cover you in front of the net with a lot of times breakdowns and clear-cut scoring chances just from lack of discipline and disorganization. So, anyways, I hope that they see that and they can try and structure it a little bit better so everybody knows where they should be and where they should not be. Because if they don't get that part of their game organized, because we all know when they have their transition game going, they're a pretty good team. But on the other side, you have to have a good discipline, defensive zone play in order to have any success in the NHL.
Yeah, well, I mean, they don't win that game in Pittsburgh without Montembeault playing the way he did. And what an impressive season he's had. He's got a .905 save percentage and a .500 record on a team that's not very good. He kept them in that game. and it was a tough one for him too, because he replaced Allen the game before, and then they flew to Pittsburgh right after the game in Montreal. So it was one of those get in at 3 a.m. So it was sort of back-to-back games for him. He really, really, really played well. But the thing is, after the game against Colorado, as you mentioned, Andrew, they fell behind 4-0 so quick. And then the same thing happened in Pittsburgh, down 2-0 less than 5 minutes into the game. And you figure, okay, here we go again. But after the game against Colorado, I was in the locker room and I was talking with David Savard. I was talking with Chris Weidman. And they were both upset that the way they came out the first period against Colorado. They said, this isn't the way we play. This isn't our style of game. It hasn't happened often this season. It was sort of like a one-off for them, but they were really disappointed in the team effort and how they sort of let Jake Allen hung him out to dry. And then it happened again, but they stopped it. They were able to get a hold of things and come back and finish the first period really, really strong. And the other thing after the game against Colorado, I asked Marty St. Louis, what do you take out of a game like that when you're obviously mismatched playing the former Stanley Cup champ or the defending Stanley Cup champs? You got 11 injured guys in the press box. And he said, we're just going to forget about this one and move on and focus on Pittsburgh. And I think that's been a real strength with Marty this year, is he hasn't really lingered, like let bad games or good games. He's always looking forward, moving forward with this team. And I think it's really paid off for them. And, Gurianov scores a goal in the third straight game. Here's another guy that the Canadiens reach out and get. Obviously a talented guy, a first-round pick, hoping that Marty St. Louis can turn him around, like what happened with Kirby Dach. And now we're seeing it. He's got 4 goals already in, I guess, 8 games with the Canadiens. He only scored 2 goals in Dallas. So part of the Canadian strategy moving forward, a big part of it is getting in young guys who maybe haven't played well or developed well with other organizations and hoping that Marty St. Louis can wave his magic wand at them. And we're seeing it again with Gurianov. So it was an impressive way to fight back. And as the losses were piling up, you could tell this team was getting disappointed. They want to play for their coach and they want to win for their coach. And I think it was a big win for this team just to end that losing streak. The 7-game losing streak tied their highest losing streak this season. An impressive performance, especially on a back-to-back when they would have got into Pittsburgh at about 2 or 3 in the morning.
100%. And then you mentioned Sam Montembeault. He's actually 8th in the entire league among goaltenders in goals saved above expectations, based on a lot of the algorithms from Evolving Hockey. So that's really impressive from Sam Montembeault after last season, where it looked like a deer in the headlights for most of the year. It was a tough year to be a goaltender in Montreal, and it's been tough this year as well. I know Rick mentioned the defensive structure. I don't know if this is something that's going to continue in hockey, but I know that there's a move towards, like, at least offensively, they're talking about like positionless hockey. It's kind of the way the Colorado Avalanche play. Like, once you're in the offensive zone, it doesn't matter whether you're a defenseman or a forward, you just create chaos and everyone's attacking. In the defensive zone, that's kind of what the Canadiens do, is they mark their man and they just follow that guy around, and I don't like it. I don't know if it has a future. I understand the concept, but when you have, say, like a Caden Gooley up at the blue line defending, and the guy who has to cover in front of the net now is like Joe Drouin or Mike Hoffman, I would rather Caden Gooley be the one throwing cross checks in front of the net, to box guys out. So I think that they're going to eventually have to change over to a system that's much more normal in NHL hockey, where you have your zone, you cover your guy in that zone. If they move out of your zone, you pass it off to the other guy, and it's more of like a team structure. Whereas I find the Canadiens defend in a very individual manner, and when somebody does lose their player, it immediately descends into chaos as one person's trying to cover this guy, and then he's left his guy out, and it's just running around with their chickens with their heads heads cut off, and it puts a lot of pressure on Jake Allen and Sam Montembeault.
It just brings back the rule of thumb, trying to think that the forwards are going to play defense, and you don't trust them. So, in the big picture, I never was a fan of giving the responsibility of the forward, even though some are obviously better defensively than others. But you always, as a defenseman, would like to have yourself in a position so that they have to get through you to get to the net. But now I see it the other way around. They're just always a lot of times on the offensive side. And any breakdown, you're asking a forward to cover up for them, and it's more of a challenge for them.
Well, as you mentioned, that positionless hockey that Colorado plays, they really confused the Canadiens, especially in the first period. And Marty St. Louis said they did some video work in the first intermission to try and figure out a way to stop it. There was one of the goals where Suzuki had a guy and then he let him go and he sort of didn't know, like, is he my guy? Is he not my guy? And confusion led to the goal. So that Colorado, that positionless hockey, I mean, their defensemen can all skate. They're all coming at you from all angles. And I think that's sort of the style of hockey Marty St. Louis wants to play moving forward with the team that, as they get better players and as some of these young defensemen and the prospects come up, I think that's the way Canadians want to play also.
So many of the team's defensemen now are so active and they don't care about standing on the blue line anymore. They want to get in there and be part of the rotation. And, for the defending teams, it causes some big-time havoc because they're not sure how far they should cover this guy. And I'm a strong believer that when these type of things start happening, you come back into the critical areas and basically set up shop and work your way from the middle out, and you're going to be in a better situation to defend by that strategy.
Well, to wrap up this point here, guys, 2 takeaways for me in this game. 6 different goal scorers for the Habs yesterday on the road. Quite impressive to see that. And this morning, for those who are watching this right now, post-game after Pittsburgh-Montreal, you probably have Hab fans saying, holy bleep, had we lost those 3 games to Pittsburgh, we would have the 4th best odds right now for Connor Bedard today with them having the season sweep over the Pittsburgh Penguins. As for the utter chaos for the Montreal Canadiens, they got hammered by the Colorado Avalanche, as we saw earlier in the week. Gentlemen, your takeaways from that game, what was the unraveling for this team against a cup champion like Colorado, and with the Habs fans chanting, "Go Habs, go," during the game?
Well, let's face it, that Colorado club is a good hockey club. And, I mean, they put in, a great example of how good they are as a group with the balance, their speed. Watch out when they have the puck. They only know one way to go about it, and that's let's go on offense. Makar, everybody's involved, and everybody is contributing. A really good team with good depth. And as far as you talk about a little bit the fans doing their chant of "Go Habs, go," and I think that's basically sending a message that the fans are somewhat patient. They are not happy with results every night, but what they are happy in looking at the direction that the franchise is going and the choices that they're making, and they're looking to be much more competitive in the future. And unlike previous Hab fans, there was no such thing as patience. Right now, they see a lot more of an upside, and they see the opportunity for some of these young guys to develop and make big contributions to the future of the hockey club.
Yeah, sitting in the press box that game, second period, they're down 6-1, and all of a sudden the "Go Habs, go" chant starts. And I'm thinking, boy, a few years ago they would have been booing them off the ice at that point. But I think it's the fans see now. Montreal hockey fans are smart. There was always sort of this belief they would never accept a rebuild, but it reached the point where this team needed a rebuild. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And I think they see now there's a solid plan in place. I think they have confidence in the new management team with Gorton and Hughes and Marty St. Louis. And they're seeing the effort from the players. I mean, this is a team that has no business competing with a lot of the teams they're playing against, including Pittsburgh and Colorado. 11 guys sitting up in the press box hurt, half their team. But the guys that come up from Laval or wherever, they keep playing hard and they're putting in the effort. And, fans, Chris Weidman spoke about this after the Colorado game. He said, the chance going into the third period, the players are feeding off it. Like he said, we realize people spend a lot of money to come watch us play, and the least we can do is put in 100% effort. I mentioned about Pizzetta getting out, fight in the third period, the guys standing up for each other and not giving up and coming back and making it a game, making it an entertaining game. And you spend your money. Hockey's entertainment. You want to be entertained. And this Canadiens team, despite the losses, they've been entertaining to watch. I mean, that game against Pittsburgh was entertaining. The third period against Colorado, you figured this was going to end, beginning of the game, you figured this was going to end 10-0. They come back and they got within 6-4, 7-4, I think it was. And it was entertaining. It was fun to watch. So I think the fans realize that there's a plan in place. They have faith in Marty St. Louis. They're watching all these players I mentioned earlier, guys like Doc and guys like Gurianov who come here, and all of a sudden they seem to find their game with Marty St. Louis coaching them. And moving forward, as Marty St. Louis has a healthier team and better players, if they can keep that same work ethic and that same never give up attitude, it's a reason to have a bright future here. So I think the fans see all that stuff, and that's why they're supporting the team. Even at the end of the game against Colorado, they lost 8-4. There were some boos from the fans, but there was more cheers. Just they appreciated the fact that the team put in a solid effort and made a game of it.
Yeah, it all comes down to that entertainment factor, right? As you mentioned, Stu, and not mailing it in games where they've clearly lost, games where they're down. The Canadiens they don't like having that ability to just wipe away the memory of being bad at a certain point in the game and continue forward, continue pushing. People, I think, identify with that as like their team. You know what I mean? Like it's something to root for. The combination of that with the young kids being the ones who are like pretty much leading this charge outside of Josh Anderson, who has like the extremely high give it a meter. Like he's just been incredible lately. But overall, I think this team is just very fun to follow. They're so many young players. You know, they started the season with 4 rookies on defense. They've had that pretty much the entire season. Everyone expected they would be worse than they are right now. I mean, the fact that they're actually significantly better than last season with a decidedly worse roster, at least to start the year. Like until the trade deadline, the roster last season should have been way better than this one, but they continue surprising, right? Cole Caulfield's been out now for 20 games. They're still kicking. Like it's very impressive on the surface. And you look at Colorado, you know, one thing that I was thinking when we were talking about positionless hockey is with how well Makar and Devin Taves fit on that roster. Same with Bowen Byram. He had that incredible stretch. With how good Mike Matheson has been in Montreal, imagine him on Colorado, how well he would fit in that system. If the Canadiens can build something like that, even with Mike Matheson, you know, currently in his prime, he's not going to be in his prime of primes 3-4 years from now. He could be a good fit the way he plays if the Canadiens kind of build towards what Colorado's doing.
You mentioned Josh Anderson there, Andrew, and I wrote a column earlier this week on why I thought it was a good idea for the Canadiens not to trade him. And he's so happy to be in Montreal still after the trade deadline. We're seeing that. He really, really wants to play for Montreal. You know, his dad grew up in the West Island of Montreal, a huge Canadiens fan, was thrilled when his son got traded to the Canadiens. And there's something to that on a young team when you have a veteran leader who really wants to be here and wants to go through the rebuild and sees that there's a light at the end of the tunnel and has really improved under Marty St. Louis. Marty St. Louis has taught a whole new different style of playing hockey to Josh Anderson, as opposed to just going up and down his wing as fast as he can. Marty St. Louis was saying, you know, Anderson's got to learn that skating fast isn't always the right speed. Sometimes you just change gears to find open ice and whatnot. And he's getting so many chances. I mean, I don't know how many breakaways he's had in the last 3 or 4 games. He hasn't scored on many of them, but the fact he's getting all those grade A scoring chances, it just shows that, you know, Marty St. Louis can get guys and show them a new way to look at the ice, a new way to think of the ice. His whole thing is about teaching guys how to play without the puck, not with the puck. And Josh Anderson's one of the guys who we're seeing him play much better away from the puck. And I think he's going to be a key guy moving forward with this rebuild. I'd be surprised if the Canadiens trade him anytime in the near future.
Gents, when you look at the Habs right now and watch that Colorado game on Monday, you look at Colorado and how they built up their team to where they are today, right? They went through some lean years, they had some high picks, and they hit on those picks. If you're a Habs fan today, do you look at that blueprint from Colorado and say, that could be us in about 4 or 5 years from now?
I think the most important thing is you look at when they had their 48-point season, that horrible, horrible season, they lost the draft lottery. And they ended up, you know, being disappointed with that. But who'd they get? Kalen McCarr. So everybody who's paranoid about this season and the Canadiens maybe not getting Connor Bedard or Adam Fantilli, which frankly they still have a decent chance of doing, remember that not all is said and done about the draft picks that are right after that, right? The Canadiens can still end up getting one of the better players of this draft, a franchise level player, if they don't pick in the top 2 or 3. It's something that can happen. And the other thing is, don't ignore talent in your own backyard. The Colorado Avalanche director of analytics, born and raised on Nuns Island.
Yep.
Arik Parnas. He used to work for me when I was managing Habs Eyes on the Prize. So the Canadiens for a long time ignored that kind of talent in their backyard. And now they're not. They've got Chris Boucher in as their director of analytics. They're headed in the right direction.
And all these franchises that have, you know, had success there has been really no quick fix. There's a little bit of a process involved there, and you've got to have good direction and obviously good people that then make decisions on their personnel. And Montreal, like I said, are in a position where they have some pretty good, knowledgeable people. So the process in motion, and the process will take a little time, but it's going the right direction.
Well, Andrew, you mentioned that positionless hockey, and I can't think. You look at their Lane Hudson, had second-round pick. The defenseman was at Boston University this season. He had 44 points in 34 games. That's a guy who can play positionless hockey.
Yep. Highest point total in the NCAA, I believe, since Brian Leach.
It's high hopes. It's high hopes for this team here. Look, we saw Colorado, what they've done. They're the Cup champions. We're seeing it with the Devils. They went through their lean years, and now they're in the thick of the race in the playoff run. Perhaps the Montreal Canadiens could be in that conversation in a few years from now. We'll find out. But if you're a Habs fan, continue with the Go Habs Go chant because it inspires them to play well on the ice. Well, gentlemen, as the Habs head into the final 15 games of the regular season, we perhaps could see some call-ups from the rookie pool. So in your forecast right now, gentlemen, do you think any youngster will be called up to the big club that will get a sample size of what they'll do for the Montreal Canadiens moving forward?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see what they do with Jaden Struble, the defenseman, their second-round pick from the same year they drafted Caulfield. He's signed an NHL entry-level deal now. He didn't have a great season at Northeastern. He had 1 goal and 11 assists in 31 games, but he's a huge kid. I remember when they drafted him, he's sort of like Slavkovsky, a man-child. Big guy, big defenseman with a mean streak. I don't know if the Canadiens will have him play here, but he'll play in Laval. Should help them in their playoff run. Imagine they might want to give him a game or two. I mean, one of the reasons he might have signed with the condition that, I want to play a couple of games, which sometimes happens in those situations with the university guys. So we might see him, but the guy I think we are going to see is Sean Farrell. Played at Harvard this season. He had 20 goals, 31 assists in 30 games. He's a guy who's just scored at every level he's ever played at. And I go back to the rookie camp this year, the development camp. The two guys who really stood out to me, it wasn't Juraj Slavkovsky. It was Sean Farrell and Philip Massard, the other first-round pick the Canadiens had this year. They stood out every time I saw them on the ice, just at their skill level. Highly, highly skilled players. Slavkovsky stood out to me at the rookie camp just because he was huge. But these other two guys, the skill level is really good. And Sean Farrell really impressed me during the scrimmages, during the drills, everything at training camp, or development camp, I should say. And I watched him and I said, boy, this guy looks like he could be a really good NHLer. And the same with Philip Massard, who was sent back to junior this season. So those are two highly skilled forwards that the Canadiens and fans can be excited about moving forward.
Yeah, I think Struble will probably get a chance. Depends on injuries, of course. If the Canadiens get a bunch of players back, it's more difficult to do that. But Sean Farrell is the one that I think everybody's most excited to see. He's probably going to be playing until the end of the, Frozen Four. So he'll probably only get possible 2 games this season, but it'll make those last 2 games of the season a little bit more exciting. Sean Farrell is not only incredibly skilled. I know people will kind of shake their heads because, another small player. He's only 5'9", and the Canadiens love their small players, and people have internalized problems with that because of watching the Boston Bruins. But this kid is incredibly smart and incredibly skilled. He just oozes hockey IQ. You talk to people who watch Harvard or who are around that team, he's very easily the best player on that team. He's possibly one of the best players in the NCAA, period, this year, up there with Adam Fantilli, with Lane Hudson, with Luke Hughes, with Matthew Nyes, if you're a Maple Leafs booster. But overall, he's a guy who is close to NHL ready, who could be a NHL scorer, and that's the most exciting thing because he's one of those players where the Canadiens have a lot of good prospects, but they don't have any star prospects at the moment, unless Juraj Slavkovsky really hits going into the next couple of years here. But this kid has the potential to really hit and become maybe not a first-line player, but a very good second-line player.
I'm curious to see how management is looking at this with all these potential kids coming up, whether or not they're really worthwhile to give them a short taste of the NHL versus, let them finish out in their designated places and, maybe give them a full go training camp and stuff. But I guess the good news out of all of this is they have a lot of excitement with a lot of their young kids that are doing very well. And one thing will never change. we'll see how well they handle the NHL experience, whether it's sooner or later. But one thing for sure is the management is pretty excited about what they have on hand, and looking forward to see what these kids can do, in the future.
And the Canadiens need goal scorers. I mean, Farrell's a goal scorer. Cole Caulfield's missed 20-odd games, and he's still the team's leading goal scorer by 5 goals at the time of this taping. And with Farrell also, making the jump to the NHL if he plays a few games. He's 21 years old now. He's not like an 18-year-old kid like Slafkovsky. He's been playing against men the last 2 seasons in the university at Harvard. So he's more ready to make the jump and play some games in the NHL than a kid coming out of junior hockey who's been playing mainly against boys. 21 years old, more mature on the ice, more mature off the ice. We've seen that with Jordan Harris. When Jordan Harris came up this season after spending 4 years at university, just the maturity level he has on and off the ice. And I think that's something that Farrell will have also when he gets here.
Gentlemen, I was going to bring this point here. Obviously, we're seeing the robust development of these prospects coming up in the next 3-4 years. Let's just say we fast forward it 2-3 years down the road. The Habs have made the improvement. They're now in that playoff discussion here. Could you see Ken Hughes saying, look, we can maybe trade some of these prospects to bring in, as Stu said, a second goal scorer behind Cole Caulfield to kind of solidify that forward attacks moving ahead here?
I think he's more likely he's going to have some money to spend in the free agent market. Kent Hughes. I don't think he's going to be in a rush to trade prospects. I think he's their whole thing is about developing young talent and making it rise. But with contracts, Drouin's contract coming off the books after the season, Monahan, Byron, even though he's been on injured reserve, they're going to have some money moving forward to go into the free agent market and try and find a goal scorer, which they're going to need. And I think the fact that Marty St. Louis is the coach here is going to make Montreal an attractive market to offensive style players.
I think it's one of those things where a couple of years down the line, maybe you start looking at that, or even next year, if the Canadiens get super lucky and end up with Bedard going into next year, you can look at trading some prospects to maybe add in a more immediate solution. But you got to be a little bit careful with that. I think you look at the Ottawa Senators, and it's not so much a cautionary tale because I don't think they're far away, but giving up that first-round pick for Alex DeBrincat might have been a year too early. They might not have gotten that opportunity the next year, but that's the kind of play that the Canadiens could make once they're in an opportunity, like they're in a situation where they can push towards the playoffs. But as of right now, I don't think it's a huge rush to trade these prospects. I think that the Canadiens can carefully manage players like Harvey Pinard, Ulanen, to build their profile. And frankly, it's happening successfully right now. Both those players are continuing to play well. And then years down the line, you can start doing what contenders do, which is you have your core built, and then you just move players through on the margins, and you continually have that stockpile of prospects moving through so that you can keep under the cap. It's the teams that fall in love with their depth that run into trouble and can't maintain themselves as cup contenders. So where the Canadiens are right now, where they have that prospect depth already built and they can focus on trying to take big swings for a short amount of time here on their rebuild, I think it's very advantageous where you can have guys like Ulanen through your lineup that maybe last 4 or 5 years or less, and then you have the next guy up who can replace that production, who can bring a different element. It's a really good situation to be in.
Well, the Brinkrat trade's not as bad as Florida giving up a first-round pick for Ben Sherrod.
Yes, that's much worse.
But when you're talking about players rotating through, you're right, because one of Marc Bergevin's downfalls was giving $3.5 million contracts to the likes of Yoel Armia and Paul Byron and guys like that, and handcuffing them at the salary cap at the top end. You get young guys coming through making not that much money to fill those sort of third and fourth line roles.
And I think Ken Hughes' plan is to develop internally with what he has, at his disposal, and then no rush. Let's see things play out, see who's able to make the cut, and then he can always address some of the guys that might be available that don't fit into the mix in what he's trying to set up. So. It's entirely in Ken Hughes' hands, and obviously certain players will make the cut and certain players will not.
Well, as long as they don't end up like Ryan Poehling did on that fateful night on that Saturday, 2019, where he had that Hall of Fame like effort. Then I think the Habs are A-OK moving forward here. But again, the pool that we all agree upon, guys, the rookie pool that they've developed so far and could be developing the next 3-4 years, definitely sumptuous for all Habs fans to look forward to in the rebuild under Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton. That'll do for this episode of Hockey Inside Out. Don't forget to subscribe and like on our YouTube page. And don't forget to sign up for the newsletter at MontrealGazette.com/newsletters. And for full episodes and bonus content, head on by Hockey Inside Out. But before we sign off, Stu Cowan, I give you the floor, my friend.
Yeah, I just want to, we had a big thing with Pat Hickey leaving the Gazette there recently. And Pat's a really well-known guy in the Montreal sports media landscape, but the Gazette's losing another key person, Dave Peters, who's been our sports editor and photo editor and the man sort of behind the scenes with the HIO show. This is his last week at the Gazette, longtime friend, colleague, one of the hardest working guys I've ever known, puts a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into everything that he's done at the Gazette, including this show. So I know Dave is going to be on the golf course a lot this summer. He's a hell of a golfer, so I'm looking forward to having more time to hit the links with Dave this summer. But from all of us here, Dave, just thanks so much for everything you've done.
I just like to extend, all the best to Dave and family. It's a special time for him to enjoy his life and family, and to want to wish him all the very best with health and happiness moving forward.
And obviously, I'll echo those sentiments. Dave brought me into the Gazette a couple of years ago. Couldn't be more thankful to be part of such a legacy institution, and I hope that it thrives in a situation that's better.
And I'll end it off by saying that Dave gave me a chance to be part of the show after Julie McKenzie, who was a phenomenal host for this show for many years, and took a chance on this pinhead over here to be the host of this show. I've been very thankful to Dave for that chance, and we're all thankful for this. And this show has been popular. I get people stopping me randomly saying, "Are you so and so?" I go, "Yeah," and just go tell everyone we love this show. And thank you, Dave, for everything you've done for this show and for everyone in this group here, plus the tech staff behind this show itself. So, Dave, thanks so much, and best of luck. And the summer of Dave begins officially soon, my friend. Can't wait to see the golf course results with you and Stu Cowan moving forward. On behalf of everyone here on this episode, wish you a great evening and a great week and a great season left over. Bye for now.